this week I want to show you some cool effects. Some go-to effects that I like to use on the huge. But, of course, there are millions and bajillions of possibilities in effects and After Effects. So I want to show you a couple that are my go-to to get you started. But really what we want to do is explore on our own. That's the goal. All right, last week we made this. Beautiful. Cat memes. We love a cat meme. Okay. So let's just create a new composition by going to this little icon down at the bottom left of our project panel. Let's call this week, what is it now, week 3, even though we had 2 weeks class. Last week we had Labor Day, so let's go. Okay, beautiful. Let's drag in our self-portrait footage, which in this case is a cat. Beautiful. And to review, let's go to Effects and Presets and type, what is it called? Key Light. Drag that on there, and then blah, 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 bloom. Bam. I'm getting, has access, okay. I'm just getting bombarded with notifications here. But here we got our green screen footage. Beautiful. And let me show you some of these effects. So we got one effect. This is, now we add effects. We just drag it on there, or we select the layer and we double click it. But first up, what could be useful, actually, let me add one more layer behind this puppy. Let's drag this below. Here we go. All right, so we have 2 interesting looking layers here, right? And as you'll notice, this footage below is pretty sharp. So what is the, oh God, that's a lot of noise. What is the opposite of sharpness? Blur. So let's go to our effects panel, type in blur. We could also, if you want to explore different effects, by the way, let's copy this a few times so that we can actually maneuver. We could go to select the layer that we're on. So we're on this layer. We could go to Effect and then look over here and all the things. And we're going to the Blur and Sharpen category. And as you can see, there's a bunch of different blurs. There's so many interesting blurs. I mean, it's really, check it out. Check all of them out, right? But the basic idea is you grab one, like Gaussian blur or Gaussian. Never know how to say that. But then you go to your effects panel over here, and you just increase the blurriness. And look at that. That is incredible. That just makes a whole different type of effect. It's almost, so look at that. Without the blur, with the blur, right? This almost looks like if you have a camera and are working with like depth of field, like the background is blurred out, right? And so it looks one way on this footage, but it looks completely different on different types of footage. Each blur effect obviously has its own settings, so you can play around with that. What does that look like? Oh, that's crazy. This is like a horizontal blur, and this is like a vertical blur. Oh, so interesting, right? We can try another blur. If we go back to our panel here and we go to the Blur and Sharpen category, let us try out Radial Blur. See what that does. Whoa. All right, now my computer is freaking out. I pushed too many buttons all at once. Oh my God, that's so much. But you can see blurs go crazy. So try things out. Oh, look at that. Wait. All right, let's just put in 10. Let's not overdo it and see what happens when we're moving. Oh my God, incredible. Or it's also super slow because our playback resolution is at full quality. But you can see that the blur goes crazy, right? Without the blur, with the blur. So a really cool way to make some strong visual effects. Let's go the opposite of blur, which happens to be sharpen. And maybe we'll, you know what? What we can do is we can stack effects. So we're going to keep the radial blur on here, and then we're going to add a sharpen to it. So instead of blur, we're going to type in sharp. And I never know the difference, but apparently on Sharp Mask does a pretty good job. So I would say try using that. Oh, here we go. And we can push the buttons there, and that adds, it makes it crispier. Look at that. That's some crazy cat footage if I've ever seen any, right? Play around with the threshold button. Who knows what that does? Oh, that's what that does. That's crazy. Now let's add another sharpen and see, the first sharpen only, oh, that's crazy. Look at that. It only has one configuration, while the unsharp mask effect has multiple configurations, so there's more control in here, right? But you can create and manipulate your footage in such an interesting way. You never know what you're gonna get. Say you want to apply these to these other layers that I just duplicated, right? But they're not automatically there. I can just take all of my effects, I can close them, just make it easier. Select all of them. I just select the bottom one, hold in Shift, select the top one, Command C to copy on your keyboard, and then select both of these layers, and then I hit paste. And look, now the effects are copied to all of the layers. Incredible. Now, this doesn't look at all like our original footage, right? And we have the little checkers in the background signifying, oh, it's a transparent layer. But I have this button, toggle transparency grid, checked on. If you check that off, it goes back to black, right? If you're exporting this, it's going to be black. This just shows me, oh, because we're blurring something, it's creating some sort of transparency. So that's what that is. Okay, but this looks completely different than our original footage. Cool. So that is blur and sharpen. Let's try to apply the sharpen to the cat. We can also take a layer and hit this little circle at the bottom left of our screen. That's our sharpen, or our solo layer, right? Now all the layers disappear except for that layer. And then what if we add a sharpen to the cat? Increase that. Oh, that's nice and crunchy. Oh, yeah, baby. All right, let's unsolo that. Now we're getting somewhere. This is a grade A meme right here. Maybe let's change it to half quality. Oh, yeah. This is the good stuff. This is the good stuff. All right. You know, it's a little overkill. If I do say so myself. So I'm going to change this back to 20 maybe. Let's see. Another really useful effect that I like that gets into color correction, which we kind of touched on last class with a couple of you, but not with everyone. The levels effect, if you add that to your layer, double click it or drag it on there, you have this, what's called a histogram. And you can crunch the shadow values on the left and the light values on the right. And you see how that creates more contrast? So that is one way of doing things. You can do it either with a graph or with these number sliders down below, right? Higher contrast. That is cool, right? Maybe if we go full resolution, you kind of see what we're talking about here. You get the point, right? What I also like doing, I'm going to delete this levels effect, which is useful. If you want the color grading kind of effect that I use for all of my color grading, for all of my footage and everything, I type in Lumetri Color. As you can see, under color correction, we got Lumetri Color. And so now if you're familiar with like the camera raw effect in Photoshop, or you're familiar with using some Lightroom, you'll recognize some of these panels. So I have the Lumetri Color panel selected, and I can open up my basic correction tab. This allows me to change the exposure, the contrast, kind of like your levels, right? Your highlights, your shadows, whites, all of these things you should or could be familiar with if you have experience with those programs. Temperature, tint, you know, we can make some crazy stuff. I kind of prefer this over the levels property. The levels effect is a little simpler. This just gives you more control. So it really just depends on what you want. Do you want a quick effect that does things quickly, or do you want more kind of nuanced control over things? In that case, Lumetri Color might be useful. You also have other things like the creative panel under here, which you can dial in the shadow tint and the highlight tint, right? And then you can go back and you can get really crazy stuff. This would probably look a little better on your footage given you taking it with a real camera, like on your phone. So this is a crunchy meme I found online, so there's probably not a lot of detail in this footage. Oh, but you can get really crazy here, right? Now we're making some graphic looking cat meme. I actually kind of like these colors next to each other, the orange and the green in the background. That's a cool effect. So that is Lumetri Color. That is useful. I'm going to keep that one on there. I'm going to keep all of these effects on here. All right, the next one, now we're getting really crazy, right? So we showed you a lot of surface level effects like that are similar to the 2D effect you're kind of probably familiar with in Photoshop or something like that. But the really cool thing about After Effects, you can easily distort imagery, so you can bulge imagery, you can scale it up, scale it down. But there's also this effect called Turbulent Displacement. If you type in turb under the distort category, which is probably the same category you would find under here, distort, right? You have all of these options, which it can be addicting to try all of these things. But I specifically love the turbulent displace option, because look what this does. This, it's really subtle right now, but his ears are getting kind of pointy, but you can displace things. And so the difference between this effect and like the other effects, these are, well, this is called these are static effects. So like you dial in the sharpness once, right? And then the sharpness will remain the same with you playing it. Same thing with Lumetri Color. You dial in the color once, and that's it. That's the color for the remainder of the length of your animation. Things like Turbulent Displacement are called procedural effects. These are effects that change and animate as you scrub through your timeline. And so now we're getting some really funky, weird stuff. Like, look at that. Now it doesn't even look like a cat anymore. I don't even know what that is. Complex. And so there's so many dials here. And you can keyframe the evolution of this so it like evolves over time. And we can get some really crazy effects. I kind of like that because it's like trippy but cat-like still. You can also, under the turbulent displace effect, change how like the noise affects it. So there's like a bulge effect, and there's a twist effect, and I don't know, there's so many settings and parameters that you can play with that just creates an infinitely interesting kind of animation, right? Oh, look at my cat with a mustache. And so this might be a good idea to add to your footage if you would rather not show your face, right? This could be a fun effect to play with. So turbulent displacement, love it. Another, I'm going to turn that off because it's really heavy for your computer. Another effect I really love, it's called glow. Very straightforward. You just add it and it adds a glow. And, you know, I feel like you can adjust some of these parameters and they make some really interesting effects, right? I think it's pretty self-explanatory. And again, you can go through all of these parameters and do it. But the cool thing is about this effect is sometimes it's not powerful enough. I want really intense neon glow. So what you can do is you can duplicate this effect on the same layer. So if you Command D, let me do that again. You select the effect. I'm just going to close everything. So we're just focusing on the glow effect. If you look to the left of my effect controls panel and you hit Command D, it duplicates that effect. And on the duplicated version of that effect, you can also change those parameters, right? So maybe I'll increase or decrease the radius so it's a little crunchier. Maybe I'll increase or decrease the intensity. I kind of like this because now we have a little more nuance to our glow. And so it might not be very visible on our cat meme footage, but on your own footage, we could even probably add this glow to our background. And look what that does. Oh, now we're going really crazy. Oh, yeah. And so at this point, your computer's probably going to start complaining. I'm on full resolution, though. It's pretty intense. Maybe go to half, and that'll be a little better. Okay. Next up, and finally, to not overwhelm you, even though I've probably already done so, there's this effect called CC Kaleida. This is like the kaleidoscope effect. If you just type in KAL in your effects panel, and then you add that to your cat footage, you'll instantly see what it does. It creates a crazy kaleidoscope effect. And so it's not spanning the entire height of, but this is just crazy, right? And so we can change the size if we want. We can play that, make it super abstract and make it look nothing like its original form. You can even go into the effect controls panel and change the way that it kaleidoscopes. I don't know. It's infinite. There are kind of infinite possibilities here. So there's wheel, there's fish head. I don't even know what this stuff means. Stuff is pretty crazy. See, now it doesn't even look remotely like what we had before, like our footage. So you can even start to create your own patterns, right? And so we're creating LSG footage kind of with our hands or using LSG archive footage, but we can also create our own organic looking effects right in After Effects. Let's try one more. Maybe starfish. What is that? I don't know. What does that mean? And then you can change the you can animate the rotation. Like, this is crazy. Oh man, look at these fractals. Oh man, this is mesmerizing. All right, this has gotten really crazy. I hope you have some fun with these effects because it's just endless. And I think it is fun to just take an effect or take a layer and explore the effects layer. And then you're gonna get pretty familiar with some of these. In this video, we covered blur, sharpen, levels, Lumetri Color, Turbulent Displacement, glowing, Kaleida. But you know, you can explore infinitely, you can change those things, and hopefully this will give you some ideas for your project. All right, see you next week.